Hello and welcome to the Big 12 Mafia Holy Rivals Show. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown. I don't have Wild Ute with me tonight, so you're going to have to put up with me. But I do have like an all-star cast that's with me tonight, and I really appreciate all of them being here. First of all, Immaculate View and Mo and Show. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Great to be here.
Yeah, very honored to have Bob Thompson in the house, retired president of Fox Sports, and somebody who's becoming kind of a regular on our show. We appreciate you being here, Bob.
My pleasure. Happy to be back. Good to see you guys again.
You too.
Yeah, it is good to see you. I know you have other things that can draw your attention, golf, for instance. So we appreciate you being here tonight. Before we jump right into the news, I know we've got you on a short time restraint. So what we're going to do is, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Make sure you follow all of us on Twitter, and then turn on your notifications so you can know when Bob Thompson's posting, or when Immaculate or Moen are posting, because their posts on Twitter are really what drive the social media content for the most part that we deal with. And so we really want to encourage everybody to do that. Also, make sure you turn on your notifications and you're subscribed to this channel on YouTube. That notification thing is really important, because when I go live, that's the only way to know when we're actually going to pop. All right. So let's just jump right in here. Yesterday, I'll back up a little bit. So 2 weeks ago, we started to hear some things about the legal strategy that Washington State and Oregon State were going to use to get sort of what they want out of the Pac-2, whether that's the resources to then try to buy their way into another conference or whatnot, or to re-establish the Pac-12 as an entity. And it took a little while for that to sort of sort itself out. And then yesterday we had that legal brief after the challenge was made by both the Pac-12, which is an interesting dynamic in this whole thing. They supposedly act like they don't have a dog in the fight, and yet they defend the leaving 10 entity. That's something I want to get into with you. And then you have Oregon State, Washington State that are trying to survive. So Bob, just why don't you catch everybody up as to what all this means and why it's been so important for us to get here in the last 14 months in realignment.
Well, first of all, for the Pac-2, they need to have some idea what's going on going forward. They've got the transfer portal opening up. They got to tell their existing players where they're going to be playing so they don't lose a bunch of people to the portal. They don't want to lose coaches to the portal. They don't want to have a level of uncertainty, not just for football, but for all of their sports. And you really need to have that going forward. And then on top of that, it's like, okay, who are we going to play? And so they need to have that certainty for one. Number two, they really need to kind of understand what the assets are and what's left within the Pac-12 conference once everybody is gone. And regardless of all this legal maneuvering, come August 1st, 10 of these schools are out of here. And the Pac-12, the Pac-2, or the 2-Pac, whatever you want to call it, are going to be left to kind of deal with whatever's left over. And they've been trying to get a good idea of what's going to be out there. And there's distributions for this school year, 2023 to 2024. That would be all the media revenue, CFP, any CFP money that goes to the schools, NCAA credits, all those type of things that are usually paid out late spring, early summer, certainly by the end of the fiscal year. And then after that, they want to see what else is left. So there's going to be carry forward NCAA credits. There's some Rose Bowl money. There's what else is there? It seems like there may be something less in the so-called slush fund or reserve fund.
Right.
But there's also some very serious liabilities that need to be considered. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people have talked about. You've got the Pac-12 is being sued by the Holiday Bowl. Right. They're being sued by a couple of former employees. You've got the Comcast issue. You've got a variety of labor NIL / issues, whether it's the NRLB / Pac-12 suit that's going on with the USC. You've got the various NIL cases, the biggest being the House versus the NCAA, which is, could be significant dollars. And you got to figure out who's going to be, who's going to get what's left, but who's also going to be responsible for paying what you're leaving behind. And so what everybody's looking for here is clarity. And I'm not sure a whole lot of clarity was received yesterday after the judge's ruling. I think it was certainly a win for OSU and Washington State. But the judge also was very clear to warn them, don't go burning down the house here, because I'm watching what's going on. And if the schools, the 10 remaining, feel somehow, some way that anything's going on, that they're getting slighted, they're going to be on the next plane to Coulter or wherever airport is, Coulter.
Yeah, right.
Colton, whatever it is. Yeah. So, they're gonna appeal, certainly, and they're gonna appeal, in probably a court a lot closer to Seattle than to Pullman. I think also you could see, excuse me, at some point, if they don't feel they're getting, some of the schools don't feel they're getting the correct level of care in the state of Washington, they'll sue local. You got 5 state schools, or 5 states with a variety of state schools, those attorney generals love to see themselves on TV, and there's nothing they'd rather do than go out and sue a bunch of people in a local court where they're going to win, probably just like Washington State did up outside of Pullman. So there's a lot of shoes left to go on this, but I think it was good, and hopefully, every time you go through a legal process, and if there's a mediation that's hanging out there and is a possibility, it does create an impetus for people to kind of maybe take the mediation a little bit more seriously, because you start to see the framework of what you might lose down the road. And it's not only that, but you also see, you're starting to get your first legal bills are coming in, and you're seeing what that costs. And it's not a cheap process, believe me. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And, where it goes from here, I guess we'll find out Monday, because there has to have some sort of response to the stay has to be filed, or a motion for review has to be filed out, whatever it's called. But so we're kind of on hold till then.
Okay. So before I get to Moen and Immaculate's questions, a couple things. First, if you're watching this live and you'd like to get a question to Bob, please make it a super chat. I'm not going to get to anybody who doesn't get highlighted as a super chat. I just can't follow everybody while I'm trying to manage the show. So there's that opportunity if you'd like to be part of the show. The other thing is, I got a question from Wild Ute, who couldn't be here tonight. He says, if you have a chance, ask him if there's an optimal size of a conference, a certain number of schools, to maximize and optimize the media company's exposure. And I would add to that, is there a top end? Is there a point where these conferences just aren't going to expand anymore?
Yeah, there's an optimal number, and I think it depends on who the broadcaster is, who's picking up the rights. Some have more arrows in their quiver right now than others. Fox and ESPN /ABC, they're pretty chock full. Certainly NBC has some windows. CBS has some windows. CW has some interest and some windows. Scripps /Ions out there floating around. And then certainly the streaming services have infinite windows. So I think that it really just depends who the buyer is. I think if I'm a conference right now, given kind of a little bit of the pressure on media rights right now, it's a lot different than it was a year ago. I think, some of the predictions that myself and others made about what the CFP would ultimately go for, are going to come down, because the business has changed somewhat. And that's, hey, things change. We were wrong. We move on and make new predictions. So I think 8, depending on, as far as numbers, is a good place to start, depending on how much, how much need there is for product out and about in the various distribution sides. You play 7 conference, 4 non-conf, and you're good to go.
And then the top end, would you say it's 20, 24?
Oh yeah, I don't I wouldn't go beyond 20 because, I guess if you depending on how you split your rights up, but you're going to have that's a lot of mouths at the table, man. I tell you,
Right.
it's a lot of
Especially
people
at
to
that level.
feed. Yeah, that's tough.
Okay. Well, and we know these are all estimates, but through all of realignment, all of us, at least everybody on this panel tonight, we've been talking about how big these conferences can be, and there's been ideas out there they could go as big as 25. I think those aggressive numbers were based on some other suppositions about how much money was going to be in the marketplace. Now that we see how far that money has retracted, I think the conferences are saying, okay, maybe 18 is good, or maybe just 2 teams out of the ACC to the Big Ten is enough. And so that appetite might not be there to be that big.
No, I think you're right. I think,
Okay.
there's been some changes to the CFP where they used to pay by conference. Now they're going to pay by school because the schools got so big and there's such a varying difference in the size of the schools. And I think that makes a certain amount of sense. The only time to me, if there ever is a split off, at what I call an up and out split off, to the quote super conference or whatever, then I could see something like that beyond 18 to 20. But as just for a regular conference, I just think it's too many mouths to feed, and it kind of defeats the whole purpose of the conference because you're only going to play people like every third year,
right?
When it comes to football.
Okay, Immaculate.
I guess my question for you, and I saw someone else talking about it in chat. My interest in what just happened in the court is that hopefully it gets us to a point where these schools are willing to reasonably sit down and talk. I kind of thought that Oregon State and Washington State probably didn't feel very equal trying to talk to the 10 on straight terms. Do you think that this court case decision maybe makes them feel a little bit strong enough to now sit down and feel like they're equals at that table?
I would think so. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think it was a win for them. And if that mediator can get everybody back in the room, which the judge encouraged them to do. I have not heard how any of these mediations are going, but obviously nobody was probably going to settle before this first round. And that round is now complete pending what happens in the, potential appeal. So I would think that if I'm that mediator, I'm probably trying to get on everybody's calendar to figure out when the next mediation would be. And I think at that point, OSU and WSU can go in with certainly a little more fluff in their feathers because they won and they've got certainly a position that they can, to a certain extent, fall back on. They can't overplay it though, because as that judge said, it wasn't a shutout. You don't have complete carte blanche to, burn and pillage the village. And the first time any of these schools of the 10 perceive something's going on, they're going to go running to the court. I guarantee you. So they have to be careful and not let it go to their head. But I think also it should give them some level of confidence if the mediator can get them all back together again.
Moen.
Yeah, Bob, I don't know if you saw it or not, but about 2 hours ago, Washington and the remaining 10, Washington on behalf of the remaining 10, did file an injunction in the Washington Supreme Court to put a temporary hold on the decision from yesterday. So,
I did see that. I don't know what the process is on that. I mean, if it has to go to an appellate court first and then to the state Supreme Court, or how long it takes to even get on the docket with the Supreme Court in the state. But that certainly was expected, I would think, and not a surprise.
Right. They're requesting an emergency hearing, so I'd imagine within 5 business days. That's the way it is here in Ohio.
Right.
I'm going to assume it's similar there in Washington. Wanted to ask you what you thought the options are for Washington State and Oregon State. Let's say the Supreme Court says, okay, this is on hold. Now you've got more and more legal bills piling up. At what point does it get for Oregon State and Washington State where they have to say, enough, we have to come up with some kind of plan?
Well, just as this week was a win for them, that would certainly be a loss. And I think again, as you go down the road in these kind of proceedings, each level creates a sense of urgency on one side or the other to solve or resolve the problem. I think that again, if the mediator can't get them together before that, he'd certainly try again, because if somehow the TRO is rejected, then WSU is right back to where they were. And I think, look, I don't think the 10 are being unreasonable in what they're asking for. Let me just put that out there. And I'm not saying that the OSU and WSU deserve nothing, but I think what they need to think about is, look, if the 10 got paid what their normal distribution would be for this year and agreed to stay on the hook for what are very large potential liabilities that occurred while they were a conference member and going backwards, if they retain the responsibility for those liabilities going forward, even though they're not in the conference, I think that's a win for Washington State and OSU. I mean, they've got $100 million in credits and Rose Bowl money.
Right.
I think it's $170 million credits, Rose Bowl money, things like that. I mean, that's a lot of money to split between two guys or two groups going forward. And to have somebody hang on to their liabilities, I mean, it's somehow they, walk away with the whole conference. Great. They got $420 million, but they might have $800 million in liabilities. I mean, this one case in the NIL, it's $1.2 billion is the exposure. If the damages get trebled, that's 4.2. There's 6 defendants. That makes each guy responsible for $700 million, more or less, right? Yeah. That's a lot of money that's not going to be covered by that $420 million. So you can't just think about how much you're going to take in. You got to think about how much potential liability you're avoiding by going, getting to the resolution on in some sort of a mediated source, as opposed to going to a courtroom, because you get in a courtroom sooner or later and anything can happen. Anything can happen. And you could win it all, but you could also lose it all. And you could also spend a whole buttload of money in the interim trying to fight it.
Very good. I've got a super chat here from one of our paid subscribers, R Web. Good to see R Web. It says, my regards to Bob. To build on Wild Ute's question, for a G5, is it better to stay regional or try to get multiple time zones for TV? And I think the question is, there's an outstanding question whether the Pac-12 could reconstitute with teams from the Mountain West and the AAC, which obviously would put them border to border.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. And I think for the conference, the multiple time zones, it makes the windows work better for TV. You can easily have 2 or 3. If you have 3 time zones, you can have 2 windows easy, and you move people around. You can play at night, you can play in the mornings. So I certainly think if let's say it was a G5 reconstituted with Mountain West Pac-2, I'd probably certainly look to get more than just the Mountain and the Pacific time zones. I'd probably try and find somebody out there in the Central time zone, whether that's, I think SMU was the likely candidate, but I'd probably go after the, Tulane or someone along those lines to have somebody in that time zone, so that it gives you a little bit more flexibility for TV.
Texas has a lot of schools.
Texas has a lot of schools.
All right. We may get back to this, but I want to move on to another topic that is close to the hearts of Immaculate and Moen, and that is the mess that's going on in Ann Arbor. You just have to shake your head about, for one thing, you've got a brand that is the brand in college football. Them and Notre Dame, it's kind of hard to beat those two. So after everything that's happened, that's come out about the last 3 years and how they've worked and operated up there, what are your thoughts about Michigan right now? Jim Harbaugh, does he stay or does he go? And kind of where that plays out.
it's been an interesting thing to follow, and I haven't been over the top with it. I have a buddy who's a diehard fan, and he is constantly badgering me as to why everybody's giving Jim such a hard time. And like, well, there's a lot of stink around him right now, and there has been for the last several months, whether it's buying guys cheeseburgers during the COVID time or whatever. He just and to a certain extent, they probably people got a microscope on them, and when you're like in that kind of a position, people are going to look at you, and they always want to pick on somebody they perceive to be at the top of the hill, and can we knock them down a couple of whacks? What's going to happen? I don't know. I just know that I think for the conference, they really I don't think they had any other choice but to act somehow. I think the commissioner, he's new, he didn't want to appear to be doing nothing. I always ask myself, what would Delaney have done? And I really don't know. I haven't talked to him about it, or he certainly hasn't come out and said what he would have done. But I kind of think that's kind of the standard of what I would look at. If you can't sit around and wait for the NCAA to do it, I mean, that takes years. I mean, look what Kansas just went through. I mean, this is a joke. I mean, not that their enforcement is very good and their investigation process is very good. It's like almost too good because it takes forever. And so I think, given what's going on, and it certainly brought to light a lot of things that people didn't really realize about sign stealing. It's as long as there's been signs, people have been trying to steal them. The question is, what length do you go to? And, what's fair and what's not fair. And, in this case, if they're sending people around, that's not right, and that's clearly not within the rules. So if that's the case, then I think someone needs to pay for it. But the question is, who's the judge and jury here? Is it just the commissioner, the conference, or is it a higher source, the NCAA?
No, well, and there's the gambling aspect too.
I just heard about that. I haven't really got into that yet, but I don't know.
Evidently that's what I'm hearing, and Moen and Mackie, you guys can correct me, but what I heard about the gambling aspect is that's actually what got the FBI in the door, was a complaint about shaving points or something going on associated with, and then they went to, this would give them a leg up, and that would be the cheating. I don't know that for a fact. I've only heard that a little bit. Moen, do you have any more information on that?
It's speculation at this point. Until the FBI comes out and says what the FBI is doing, all we can do is speculate. But yeah, that speculation has gone around. That's how they became involved in the Weiss case, the Weiss Rossi.
Oh yeah, right. That was a different case where the FBI was claimed to be involved. We don't know if they've also become involved in the Harbaugh situation or not.
Moen, did you have a question for Bob?
Sure, Bob. You had mentioned 20 teams within a conference earlier. So the Big Ten's sitting at 18 right now. Top 2 targets. We know one of them's Notre Dame. Who is number 20? And I want you to defend it.
Oh, here we go. Let's go.
Oh,
I'm ready for this.
Number 20. I would say that.
Isn't that a parlor game? We should do this as a parlor game. There should be a fireplace behind you, Bob, and we should be smoking.
I don't know. This is going to be like one of those questions. Like somebody asked me, what was the better brand in Utah or BYU?
It is BYU every day.
I would say North Carolina or Virginia.
Virginia.
See, people think I'm crazy when I'm saying Virginia.
Okay.
And I would do it. I'd probably give the edge to North Carolina. I think, based on the school, the basketball history, the fact that the football is improving. I just think it checks off a lot of boxes, not to mention it's a state they're not in at this point. I look at, if I go further down the coast, first of all, I don't think they go west anymore. I think if you go further down the coast on the East Coast, Miami's kind of interesting. Florida State doesn't fit the bill in my mind. Clemson, Nah, not really. So I really fall back on Virginia and UNC, and I'd probably give the edge to UNC.
Okay.
I'm still that took me aback. I'm still shocked.
Who'd you
by
think?
that.
Who'd you think I was going to say?
Florida State. Florida
Yeah.
State because of the market and where all the players are and the exposure and the growth and everything. It's tax free. You know, those are all the reasons.
Tax free. What's that going to do?
They don't pay. Well, they don't. Everything they invest down there is it doesn't. They don't have an income tax. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Immaculate, go ahead.
To touch on that one or to go somewhere else, I got to ask you something, just your personal opinion about the Michigan situation, just taking it back to that. I have found it kind of funny that Michigan decided to give a 3-game suspension to Harbaugh for giving a cheeseburger to a recruit. And yet we have seen so much theater rise about the conference giving them a 3-game suspension for something as serious as these allegations. I call this 75% theater, 25%, actual substantial things going on. How do you feel about this? Do you think this is just a whole lot of politicking, or do you think there's real to this? Like when Michigan talks about leaving and, all of that.
I don't think there's, what comes up in a Board of Regents meeting can be, in the heat of the moment. So I don't really, look at that as a serious threat. I think they're kind of slightly different things. I think the cheeseburger, incident was the school figured, I'll get out ahead of this. We'll go now, get it over with. Maybe we can, it's not unlike what Kansas did, I think, a little bit with Self. We get ahead of it. And, at the end of the day, the NCO will come down and say, well, okay, it was kind of, they self-policed and we're all good.
Sure.
So that's what I think of the cheeseburgers.
Right.
This other one's a little different. And I think, there's no doubt the commissioner had, and probably rightfully so, a lot of input from other institutions in the Big Ten. If I was found out that, people were filming my signals and then going back and, spending forever deciphering them, and having non-coaching staff film things, and I'd be pissed too. And so I think, Tony Petitti's issue is he's trying to, keep the house in order, but also be perceived as doing something and not just being a guy sitting behind the chair there in outside of Chicago. And it's tough. I mean, to have this come down his first year, but it's going to happen sooner or later. Something was going to happen, and he was going to have this first episode, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. And although there apparently has been a lot of smoke about this for a number of years, but I don't know how it just came to light now. But maybe because it was so blatant that it's quite evident to a lot of people.
Do you think it matters the fact that it was 3-game suspension and that required the executive committee to act on this or to give them permission? Because if I'm understanding this right, the executive committee is like 4 people that the president's appointed. I mean, it's not actually the president's, but it's you would say that they're probably speaking for the presidents when they do that, because he's only has permission up front to do like a 2-game suspension and a $10,000 fine without executive committee permission. So would you say that this is more like a statement towards Michigan from the conference as a whole, since it required that?
Yeah, that's what I would say it is. That's all I could believe that it is at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of that's all it really seems to be. I think people are making this out to be more than that. This is the rest of the schools slapping Michigan on the hand, and the fact that it's towards Harbaugh as well.
Yeah, if they would have gone forward and said, if you get to the championship game, you can't coach, then that would have been a different question, or you probably would have had a different answer.
All right, Bob, we've got you. We went through the 30 minutes. I'm going to keep you for one more question, if that's okay with you. So I've heard that Washington State and Oregon State have said out even in court that they'd like to reconstitute the Pac-12, and in doing so, the teams that are going to be on that list: San Diego State, Boise State, Tulane, maybe USF, UTSA. These are all schools that have been talked about. Do you see a national conference that is anchored by Washington State, Oregon State, and the Pac-12 brand being worth $12 to $15 million a year on a 4 or 5 year contract?
If you gave me 8 of the Mountain West Conference schools,
Right.
7 or 8, and I'm not going to tell you which ones. You can go ahead
Sure.
and guess.
Right.
And Oregon State and Washington State, and Tulane. I don't know that I want to go fishing on the East Coast.
Okay.
I could think, Mountain West Conference is getting like 5
Right.
now. They got a couple years to go, so maybe they end up at 6, based on the increases. You might get 10 to 12 a year. I don't think you get a triple and get to 15.
Okay.
It's just not. It's good, and I think they'd be a very good G5 conference, and I think they'd be in the running for the G5 auto bid. It's going to end up 5-7, and with all this, forget all this other rigmarole that's going out there. It's going to be 5-7.
Okay.
And G5, they're going to be, they're going to be one of the top G5s. If not, that a number of them could probably, get in the 7. Be an invite for, one of the top 7 outside the 5 autos. So I don't know that I'd need a whole nationwide conference to do that. You're looking to hang around the 2030, see what happens in the next round of realignment, have some flexibility. And the good thing with the Mountain West is the deal's up in 2 years, and those guys can walk pretty much scot-free into the different conference. And the Pac-2 can survive for 2 years with 2 schools, add 8, add 6, whatever. They're back to the full-blown conference within the NCAA's eyes and the CFP's eyes, and everybody's happy.
Very good. Well, we know things are going to be happening. There's the lawsuit, the things being restudied on Monday. Then they'll come up with some sort of hearing to say, okay, what are the next steps? Because they are appealing all the way to the Supreme Court if they can. I don't know how they skip the appellate courts, but that's a question for a different day. Bob, we really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Tell people where to find you and what you do.
I'm at, what am I, at RLT Sports, and
That's right.
I'm in and out. Some days I'm there, some days I'm not. It depends what's going on, but love to have conversations with people, and just don't try and get me a job.
Okay. We're not doing that for you. No,
Absolutely.
We gave up on that a while ago.
All right, guys. Take care.
Have
Thanks,
a great
Bob.
night, Bob.
Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you so
Have a
much.
great night.
Take
All right,
care.
Bye-bye. Wow. Guys, how good is that?
There we have it.
So many answers. I'm here making notes. So Bob made some declarative statements, which he's not normally want to do.
Uh-huh.
He said the big is done going west. He said if they do any teams, there's probably going to be 2, Notre Dame and or Virginia, UNC. I think UNC has to be the pick there, but
Right.
you could argue that one way or the other.
Uh-huh.
And then he says 5+7 format. That's it. It might not be might not be official. In other words, they haven't voted on it yet because of Kirk Schultz's intransigence, but it's going to be that format. And I think we've assumed that for a while. There were a couple other nuggets in there. What were you guys' biggest takeaways from what he was saying?
I guess in my mind, I'm thinking kind of what he's talking about on the West. Although if they're dealing with Mountain West right now and making deals with them now for scheduling,
Right.
they're doing it with everyone in mind. And so as much as I think he's right about the most efficient decision would be to take maybe the top 2/3 of the Mountain West, I kind of feel like if they're already making a deal that, okay, we'll schedule with you now if you'll do this later, I think they're probably going to have to merge with the whole thing. And it's not going to be the most optimal decision, but that's realignment. You never really get 100% optimal. So that's probably what I'd ask them, like, hey, how could you make the best out of this?
Okay.
And so That's probably my biggest on that, is that they're probably not going to get optimal on that, and so maybe that's going to keep them kind of looking for any other opportunity for a little while longer.
Okay, I appreciate that. Moen?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he picked North Carolina instead of a Florida school. I think it shows that it's more of a cultural fit research institution than
Right.
the splashy sports franchises in the market of Florida. More or less just leave Florida to the remnants of the ACC and SEC.
So does that make it more likely or less likely that Florida State, Miami, Clemson stay in the ACC if the Big Ten basically says, maybe, maybe not, but we're not going to tell you before you actually leave because we won't want to get tied up in legal disputes? I mean, this sounded a little declarative to me. I was a bit surprised about that.
Well, it's Notre Dame first.
Right.
Notre Dame is the linchpin to everything. So Notre Dame is going to probably get to call their shot on who they want to come with. So, and Notre Dame's probably going to take UNC. I know they have a rivalry with Miami, but I think UNC's number 4 among research institutes. That would put Michigan, Wisconsin, Washington, and North Carolina all under the auspices of the Big Ten. And I think that would give you 4 of the top 6 research institutes, public research institutes in America under the conference. So, but you heard it again. I was explaining this to people yesterday about the UVA. UVA, it's the gateway to the Beltway. A lot of politics flows through UVA right into Washington, D.C.
A lot of sports fans don't get that that's part of the Big Ten equation.
Yes.
It's
have
not
politicians in your pocket.
It's not just on field. I mean, and that's not exactly the same with every other conference. And so, if that's not the culture of another conference, they may not understand, like, this doesn't make sense. Well, they think that they can bring in a school like Virginia and North Carolina and build them up with their money and their connections and by playing each other. I mean, people are always talking trash about the Big Ten and how it's terrible and how they don't play anyone internal, but they're still getting the most money. So what do they care what other people think about it? If they look at West Virginia or at Virginia and North Carolina and say, these are our type of schools, we'll help them make as much out of their programs as we can.
So, and I think this is, did you just say this, Moan, where the big brands for football, I'm really I'm recounting this it's really been about 16 months. It's been a mess. And people have talked about super conferences and 2 conferences and P2 and, the ACC disappearing, the Pac-12 reappearing and being reconstituted, all these big and flashy ideas. But at the end of the day, I think what we're finding out that outside of these major grabs, which were largely underwritten because the media companies saw value, some of the other stuff are reaches. Like saying that you're going to have Clemson could potentially go to the Big Ten. I don't think that was ever an option. And the reason they did that is they were trying to play the Big Ten off against to get an invite for the SEC. At this point now, the SEC is at 16, right? Am I right on that?
You're right.
Yeah,
I don't.
Be on 16 now.
I don't know. They go 20. They could go to 18, pick up Florida State, and if it's not North Carolina, maybe Virginia, whatever that play is, and say we're done. And it could be codified. And we might be talking by 2026, everything being pretty much solid, nobody moving anywhere.
Right. But I mean, that's based on if they stop at 20. I still think it's a possibility the Big Ten goes to 24. I think if they want to be a national brand and view themselves as the NFL of college football, they go to 24 and open new markets.
But aren't they that now?
No, they're not in Florida. They're not in Texas. Those are 2 huge states, 2 huge markets. They might go to 22. Who knows? Right. Maybe they add North Carolina, Notre Dame, Miami, and a Texas school to be named later, TCU or Texas A&M.
Texas
one of those.
A&M is who I would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah. So
just remember this: in order to make this happen at all, it probably has to be enough schools in order to put the pressure on the ACC. Like, no, they just grabbed 3 more schools, so they're thinking that if they stay at 15, they don't even have to worry about renegotiating with ESPN. I think that they would if ESPN came calling, but nonetheless, just taking 2 to 3 schools total in this, I don't think it's enough. Going with 4, maybe not enough. That's why I'm thinking this has to be a bigger move of 6. And so,
to be clear, you're saying 6 from the ACC.
Yes.
Okay.
Like, it has to be enough to spark some things to happen within the ACC. So just an FSU and a North Carolina, or just an FSU and a Clemson, doesn't really do that. Notre Dame does that because that moves them back to their old Gore agreement, because the one that they signed in 2016 was because Notre Dame was joining. It was the one that gave them the 15th member for that whole statute. So if Notre Dame leaves and it's easier for them to leave, it's a different situation. But if this is just going to be other ACC schools doing it, I'm thinking there has to be enough schools. And so, I think Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina State, and Virginia Tech are all very good SEC style programs. The atmospheres of Virginia Tech and North Carolina State are absolutely better than North Carolina and Virginia.
right.
And if
you don't have to add them as full members, you can do a partial payout like the Big Ten did.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech would be a great rival to have up there with Kentucky and Tennessee. They don't, forcing those schools come down into the deep South all the time for good games. I mean, having a little bit more of a presence up there in Mid-America, I guess we'd call it the Mid-Upper South or whatever it is. I think that's a good idea. I think that's good matchups, and I think people in other areas would care about that.
So we've talked in the past media markets. We've talked about eyeballs, actual people and ratings for schools. We've talked about their geolocation and how that relates to where their fan bases are. All these things we've studied in depth for the last 6, almost 7 months. And you can't go into it with much more greater detail than we have from the very beginning. So knowing all this information that we've now gotten over the past 15 months and going by what Bob has said over and over again, aren't we looking at a more conservative movement, at least in the near term before 2026? We still have some things to settle. The Pac-2 has to be settled. That has to be mediated or adjudicated. Something has to be done there. And then, I know Greg Flugar, all hats off to Greg Flugar and his show. He today was talking about Clemson potentially in the next several months making an announcement. They will be leaving the ACC. That didn't come from me. I would encourage you guys to go to Peek Around the Corner, Flug Empire on Twitter, and Greg's show on YouTube, and watch that latest episode that he put out. But I mean, there's just it's a shell game on so many levels, and I just think at this point that for the most part the big moves are done. The only other one I see possibly happening would be domino, where the ACC loses maybe 2 schools and the rest of the ACC have to make a decision. Do we stay in sort of a crippled ACC that's going to be sort of landlocked except for these 2 schools way out on the West Coast? Or do we want to break that up, which I'm feeling less and less likely, and go chase more money at say, the Big 12?
Yeah, I mean, we all have different perspectives on how that goes, and none of us really know. So you might be right. I just tend to think nothing can happen if something bigger doesn't happen, and that's just more of a procedural thing.
Yeah, it reminds me of that game where you put the marbles in and pull the sticks out.
Right.
If something breaks, the Big Ten didn't want to take Oregon and Washington this year. They wanted to push that down the road.
But they wanted to take them eventually, and they don't want them damaged.
Right.
Yep.
Which is why they ended up taking them.
Well, and they had to make an early investment. It was buy low, hold high, basically.
Yep.
Right. But if Notre Dame comes to them and says, okay, we're in, that's going to send shockwaves throughout the ACC.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
At that point, a bunch of schools become available. Do you say no? That's what I mean.
No,
It might
you
be
say yes right
conservative.
away.
Yeah, it might be 7
Yeah.
years down the road, or it could be tomorrow. We just
Right.
don't know.
Well, this is the thing I think we need to keep in mind is no matter what we're talking about on the bigger sort of existential questions that has been circling for months and months and months, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people that have personalities. And these people have personalities, each have their own agenda. Each one of them has something they want to get out of a conversation or a transaction in dealing with someone else. And I just think that world is shrinking. And it was exploding. We thought over the summer, over the last year, we thought there was just going to be this huge game of pickup sticks. But now we find out that, except for, like you said, the Colorado move, people weren't really looking to do anything different. It was sort of forced on them at this point. So I just think it's more important for us to keep in mind that while we like to talk about big moves and they're exciting and fun to do, at the end of the day, the money's drying up in media. ESPN's hemorrhaging money and viewers. I just don't know where the growth money comes from to make changes.
Streaming.
Does
You've
it
got
though?
Amazon wants in the game. If Notre Dame joins the Big Ten, that frees up another slot on NBC. You've got the CW that's interested in sports now. You've got, once they finish cutting all their fat, you've got Time Warner Discovery sitting out there. But, we don't know how the NBA contract's going to go. They may need something to fill that void on their network. So,
Right.
I mean, like I said, it's like that marble game. I don't know what it's called, but just at some point that stick's going to be pulled and marbles are going to rush out. So I guess we'll just sit around and wait and see who pulls that stick.
Immaculate, you want to add anything to that?
To me, all the big money that's coming up that can pay for movement now is postseason money. And I know people tend to have their thoughts on where they think the CFP will go in 2026. I'm actually thinking bigger than that, and that there's going to be some other opportunities available to these conferences with their own postseason. And I think that's where all the money is. There's no more money in the regular season, because it's supply heavy. The postseason is demand heavy, so that's where you go. It's just market demand. That's where you look to fill, and so that's where you need to go. And for me, the only way to do that and make these conferences a lot more money is for them to do something like a conference playoff sometime after 2026,
Right.
because then they control that. It's not do we get 2 teams in? Do we get 3 teams in? Do we get 4 teams in? It's no, you're going to have 6 teams every single year.
Right.
And it's more money than they're getting now by far. And whoever is your full conference champion is going to be well proven. So I think that the money is going to come from means like that people can't see right now. So they don't rely on that. So they don't see where the money is, and that's understandable. So to me, I think the people who are behind the scenes, who know all of this, they've got their reasons for it, because it seems like realignment is still going strong and it's still going to happen. And we're sitting here going, where's the money? So, we can look at this and say it's there somewhere. If it wasn't, all this talk wouldn't be happening.
I think people are liking to hear themselves talk in a lot of ways, to be honest. But I opened up for, if you want to join the show with a quick question, you can ask us. Please click on that link I just posted in the comment section. Join the show for a couple minutes, and we'll talk over your question live. If you want to do that, I'll try to get to questions in the comment section, but honestly, I am so slow in the comment section. It's hard for me to get to those. So I'll do my best to answer some of those questions, but if you want to join the show, click on that link. I'll post it again right there. The other thing I want to remind everybody is make sure you follow us all on Twitter, turn on your notifications on YouTube and Twitter, subscribe on on YouTube, and join the Big 12 Mafia family. We're here for you. We don't do this for our own gratification. We do it to interact with all of you people. So really appreciate you being here. Been a fantastic viewing audience tonight. Let me see if I can get to some questions or comments here. Charles M says, with Clemson and FSU gone, ACC is equal or better than the Big 12. Post SMU, Stanford, Cal. Big mistake by the Big 12. Thoughts?
I disagree with that fundamentally. But you can't compare the two if Clemson and FSU are gone.
No.
I'm sorry, there's bigger brands in the Big 12.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Mac, you want to say anything else?
Yeah, you'd have to do, rate all of your Big 12 schools, starting next year from top value to bottom value, which would actually be hard to do. There's a lot of equal value there. And then bring the AC schools next to them in a comparison. And I would have a hard time finding an ACC school, once you take out Florida State and Clemson, that is truly, higher value than the one you're putting them up against in the Big 12. And as you get farther down the conference lineup, I definitely think the Big 12 is higher in value. So I don't see that as the case. I do have my own theory as the ACC in the future, and if that was to happen, then I think it's a lot higher value than people think. But as it stands now, and with this talk of bringing in some AAC teams, I don't think it would be equal in value.
This is something that I don't know how the ACC deals with it. I realize SMU's not getting primary media money. It's come out this week, or maybe it was the end of last week, that SMU is going to be receiving college football playoff money if there's any. They will be receiving a portion of the NCAA basketball money. They're just not going to get anything out of the main media deal for 9 years, just so we're clear. They are going to get some money. Kenneth Evans here says the 18,000 viewers of the SMU games beg to differ. SMU, even what are they, 8-1 or something? They're actually winning games, and yet they can't get more than 50,000 people to watch their games. It's really, it blows me away.
I couldn't tell you if they were 8-1 or 1-8.
They'd probably get more in the ACC viewing, but yeah, right now in the AAC, it's not that much.
I guess they had, Jason Spangler says they had 29,000 last week. And obviously that'll change when you're playing P5 conference, when they're playing Clemson, there'll be more fans. Yeah. But it has to represent a core value for the school right now, though, that even with success, they're struggling a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not why they got the invite. So, I mean, it's
right.
Yeah, people pointing that out. It's like, okay, yeah, I know. But I mean, but for people who are pointing that out, it's kind of like, okay, but they got that because they're willing to pony up the money that's making the Stanford, California move possible.
Right. Gary Pakaris. Hey, Gary, it's nice to meet you. You're new to the show. Please subscribe to the channel, man. I'd love to have more Penn State and Big Ten people in here. We get along really well. I'm glad to have you. Here's his question. I think NBC could, and you've said this yourself, Moen, I think NBC could become a bigger player in realignment before or more marquee games on prime time, plus a possible second Peacock game in the future. What do you guys think about that?
I don't know if I want more Peacock games, but it's good for the conference. But I really want to find a way to have easy access between streaming partners here and then the cable network providers. It's just not an easy way. Like when your team is on that, you're kind of cut off from all the rest. So,
right.
Unless, someone's using YouTube, there are other options to make that easier. It's just for a large majority of the viewers, though, it's not a great option. So
the two teams playing in that should have it on their local affiliates, I think. And then you can black out the rest of the country to make them watch Peacock. But
I like that. It doesn't help me here in Phoenix for Iowa, but I mean, for people in Iowa, I'm sure they'd like it.
Do we know how solvent NBC Sports is?
They are owned by Comcast, and they have lots of money.
Comcast is very solvent.
They're actually the number one right now.
I actually forgot about that. That was dumb of me. Of course, I knew that NBC was owned by Comcast. Yeah, that was dumb.
Right. But losing if Notre Dame joins the Big Ten, that opens another college football slot on NBC. They usually play 2:30 games. They could put a 3:30 game out there now and pay the Big Ten for a 3. I don't know if the Big Ten would sell them. They wouldn't want to cut the nuts off of CBS with their 3:30 game, but
That's a tough call. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know if they do that or if they try to buy a game off of the SEC or, they'll probably just see where their options are at the time. They're also probably trying to buy into the CFP. There's open
Right.
games on the market
Right.
right now for that. So that's probably their priority right now.
Gary, great question. Glad to have you here. Well, I've got a second. I wanted to show everybody what my YouTube page looks like and how you can get there so that you can join as a paying member of the channel. I haven't done this for several weeks. I thought I'd do it really quick. I like to do it live, even though Moen gets upset with me because he recorded something for me and I haven't had a chance to actually implement that. But let me show you what this looks like so you guys know how to get to the screen. If you want to become a paid subscriber, let me make this full screen. So you go to the main Big 12 Mafia page, and right here in the middle, there's a join button. You click on that join button. Let me hide this current comment. Click that join button, and there's 3 subscription levels. And if you join as a founding member, I actually have a bunch of rally towels that I send out to those members as sort of a thank you for being part of the Big 12 Mafia family. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew about that. Thank you very much for being here. I've been corrected. It looks like SMU is 8-2. Their only losses are to OU and TCU. That tells me they're a good team. I mean,
They're doing
why?
pretty good.
Yeah, why are they still drawing 18,000? I don't care if the competition's Tulane or, Southern Mississippi. They should be doing better than that.
The AAC just is not getting that much
Yeah.
viewership. It's what kind of makes me wonder about some type of a deal between the AAC and the Mountain West at some point in time, especially if Oregon State and Washington State are involved. I just there's actually better brands now in the Mountain West than there are in the ACC after they had some of their best ones taken. So that's part of the problem. When you take out Houston, when you take out UCF, when you take out Cincinnati, those are teams that SMU might have played and then people would have cared. But right now, they're a little stripped. So
Very good. And you want to say anything else to that?
That's pretty accurate. The AAC is pretty threadbare now.
Yeah, okay. I almost think that maybe some of their top schools might think about joining up with Mountain West Pac Conference and just doing like a spread thing, like 2 different divisions across the country.
I could easily see them going 8-8, and I could see them doing that.
Or if they had to do the 14 with the Mountain West, they could add 6 in the East and do 20. It's a high number, but
sure, it's anything to reduce the travel and add validity to the conference, because that's what they're fighting over now is the PR part of it. Are they really a prime time conference? Do they deserve even $12 to $15 million a year? I don't know. I asked that question to Bob. He obviously said it's probably 10 to 12 at the outside. So I know Washington State and Oregon State right now. We'll have to get, if there's Oregon or Washington State people in the chat right now, let me post. I'm inviting you to join the show. I'd like to ask you guys live, if possible, what you guys felt about that note from Bob. Just click on that link in the comment section and join the channel. And we can talk about what that valuation might be for those schools in a new Pac-12 conference. Jim F. has a great comment here. It says, so when ESPN does direct-to-consumer next year and everyone drops cable, what happens to FS1 and the Big Ten network?
Well, the good news is the baby boomers are going to ensure that cable still exists.
I would agree with that, yes.
So they're still going to be out there. You're still in don't undercut the amount of internet cable that's out there now with YouTube TV, Sling TV, Fubo. I know people don't consider them internet or cable companies, but they really are. It's just cable via internet as opposed to cable via cable.
Right. Immaculate?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of options here. One thing I did want to bring up to you, though, after what we were just talking about was the possibility, like as you're saying, if NBC can't get a second game with the Big Ten, if all that breaks down or whatever, what about the possibility of NBC signing with the Big 12 for a second game?
I think that could happen.
Do you think so, Moen?
I think that could happen.
I think we lost Moen. He's in his cool picture phase.
He's phasing out. You there, Moen? All right, we'll wait for him to come back. I think so. Immaculate. In fact, I think these conferences need to be open to everything right now.
Yeah, and if I think that they would probably rather grab a second Big Ten, nothing against the Big 12, just in terms of value. Like we just saw a chart come out that 6 of the top 10 fan bases in the country are all Big Ten, and if you add Notre Dame to it, that's 7. That's why they get it. People are like, oh, Big Ten football is terrible. Yeah, but it's viewership. It's just, it is what it is. But and they may not pay the same to the Big 12 as they do to the Big 10, but it would still be a good contract, and that could in itself bring the Big 12 much closer, as well as put it above the ACC. So I had that on my mind. I'm like, this is possible. If they cannot get it figured out between NBC, CBS, and Fox on how to get CBS or NBC another slot with the Big 10, the Big 12 is sitting right there, perfectly capable of filling that.
OPD Don says, I was surprised to hear Bob say leave the Florida schools to SEC and ACC.
Yeah,
I think you saw us. We were surprised too.
And I think that's that traditional look of he's always talking about Delaney. Remember, he's from that time, and you got to understand in the Big Ten, it was all North Carolina. Everyone wanted North Carolina this, North Carolina that, and it was Delaney push because he's a alumni of North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
So people don't realize that connection. And Delaney is still a consultant to North Carolina, and he's still a consultant to the Big Ten. So he's still running in between all of this. So, there's that political aspect to this. And like I said, the Big Ten thinks they can take a Virginia and a North Carolina and make something of them. And if they don't, they're just still going to say, well, the money that we make off of our research work together is far going to outweigh our TV contract. So we'll make do on that. Like they would rather lose a little money with a North Carolina and a Virginia,
right,
than they would lose a little money with the Florida State or a Miami or, if you get that at all. Like they'd almost rather spend money on the TV contract to get them on the back end in the BTAA.
Let's change gears here, since nobody's joined the show with us. John Wilner just posted this in the last 90 seconds, and it says latest legal filing from the Pac-10 as a whopper suggests the Pac-2, meaning Washington State and Oregon State, with board control could terminate members. Pretty sure that would cause issues with the Tier 1 contracts. Those contracts are the Pac-12 Network, ESPN, and Fox. There are 70 men's basketball games on Fox ESPN this year, and the conference doesn't have all of financial year 24 revenue yet. It's paid on schedule. So that's what they're claiming. They're saying if you guys give them control, and it says it right here, they will terminate or suspend members. That's their fear.
That's fear tactics.
They're using that as a fear tactic.
Mm-hmm.
To try to convince people, and I'll post that up again, Moen, so you can see it. They're trying to scare people into saying, see, if you give them the reins, all they'll do is disenfranchise us.
And the other two schools couldn't fill those contracts, and they would be on the hook for damages to those networks. So the idea that they would do that, it's silly. It's kind of like some of the arguments that they made in the courtroom, which they did very well, and it actually got them those stipulations. But the same thing here, OSU and WSU are not going to do this because they would be on the hook for the liabilities for doing this. But, it's an argument, and you could say, hey, we're fearful of this happening, and that's probably enough to get the TRO.
Moen, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think they're going to find a much friendlier court in Olympia than they did over by Pullman. So I think they do get the TRO. I think the Supreme Court will hear it as an emergency, and they'll get the TRO from them.
Gosh, it's fascinating. That case yesterday, the legal arguments in that courtroom were just, man, I was riveted. It was like the O.J. Simpson trial all over again. So let's see here.
Could you imagine, just real quick, could you imagine being in that little town? I mean, your judge is talking about the ghost at a place. Like he's trying to sell this as the main attraction to the town. I was just sitting there going, oh, are you kidding me? I mean, it's such a small town, and to have all these people descend upon it for this had to be kind of wild.
So I used to go fishing there every year.
Oh,
True
did you?
facts. Oh
So
yeah.
you're familiar.
There's the Toucan River goes right through there, and you catch Dolly Varden that are huge. I mean, you'll catch Dolly Varden. They're almost 2 feet long or more. So yeah, it's a beautiful place to go and fish and hunt.
How big is that town?
Oh, maybe 500 people.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
that had to be pretty wild when all those guys.
It might be bigger now. I mean, that was when I was a kid, but it can't be.
Probably not a lot bigger.
Maybe a few thousand at the most. Yeah.
He said there was more lawyers in that courtroom than there are in all those counties out there, and they counted out maybe like 15 lawyers in that room.
Right.
So,
That's what Canzano said.
yeah.
Hey, if you didn't catch John Canzano's interview with who was it? It was Dan Patrick today. Go to the Dan Patrick show. Look for his interview. John did a great job. I think John, especially in the last several months, has done a fantastic job covering all of this. Realignment phase was a challenge at times, but I think this last 2 or 3 months, John Canzano's been at the top of his game. He and John Wilner, I think, they're both doing. I just like what they're doing recently. Rock Chalk 94 says Pac-2 is like an ex saying she can kick you out and keep everything. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly right, Rock Chalk. I'm going to post my link one more time if you'd like to be a part of the show. Oops, that's the wrong article. Hang on, let me get the right link. If you want to be a part of the show for a question or a comment, all you have to do is click on this in the comment section and follow the instructions and join us. Other than that, let me get to a few more questions, and I think we'll pull this out. It's been a great show tonight, guys. Appreciate everybody who spent their time and have been here with us on a Wednesday night. Let me go backwards and see if I see anything. So another Rock Chalk comment says Notre Dame will win the big because independents will not support NIL much longer. That's the difference between now and 20 years ago when they would have died on the independence hill. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, once you get conference employees in there, it's going to be a game changer, no pun intended.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the expansion to 20 teams calls for 10 conference schedule games. That's part of what pays for it. I think that's what the SEC is planning for and why they didn't move up to 9 games, even though they talked about it. It's to use that to cover for the cost in order to get the same pay from ESPN and Fox and all that. They're moving to more conference schedule games. Once that happens, that's going to be really hard to work out as an independent. And then if I'm right about the conference playoffs in the future, then there's zero room for independence for anybody, like not just Notre Dame, but all of them.
2026, man. I'm telling you. Kaufman says I would join the show. It's my wife and I's wedding anniversary today. Shout out to you, Kaufman. Thank you so much for being.
He says 4 years in chat.
A valued member of the Big 12 Mafia family. Really appreciate you being here, and your continued paid subscription is much valued, and I want you to know I really appreciate it. So happy anniversary to you and your wife. Thank you for coming in and saying hi. This is something I wanted to get with Bob, but we ran out of time. Basically, I took the time that I was going to ask about this and gave it to Michigan, but this idea that they've escalated in Washington, where it was filed. Then there's this 6 interstate transit idea, the 6 states that are all involved. And why isn't it a federal case? And then you have some antitrust and some other things in the state of California that they're saying, hey, we can do whatever we want. It's incorporated here. Screw you, Washington. We're just going to do it and ignore what you say. Come after us and tell us we're wrong. So, and I wanted to ask that of Bob, because I still don't think we have an answer. If the Washington State Supreme Court says one thing, what's to stop the California Supreme Court saying something else? And then what happens?
Chaos.
Well, it's already chaos.
Settlements. That's what I keep saying. I'm like, God, I just think at this point in time, they have to know that this just gets too crazy, takes too long. They're going to have to just make a settlement at some point in time.
Well, I think if the Supreme Court does issue a TRO, that will push them towards a settlement.
It
Nobody
will.
wants to keep dragging this out. It's
They will.
costing everybody money.
I don't think the Supreme Court's as much in Washington's pocket as people want to say, but they're going to grant the TRO.
Sorry, I'm typing a message if he can't hear us. Raider Vision just got in the house. He's one of our paid and loyal subscribers. I'm inviting people to join the show, Raider. If you want to join the show, I'll post the link again. Click on it if you want to join. If not, that's cool. I know people are coming and going. I just wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to join the show if you'd like to. There is the link. All right. Let me just
Charles asked
quickly-
if the TRO is denied.
I don't even want to. If that happens, I don't know what
Washington State and Oregon State start flexing.
And what does
then
that
it
look
would
like?
it would fall to California at that point. Then they would do-
You don't. I actually want the Supreme Court to offer that TRO because, as you're saying, if they don't, this gets ugly quick.
Eugene, one of our paid members, says you need to get Bodie back on. He nailed the results of the hearing. I have been following Bodie McBodens or whatever it is, and he is fantastic. He's a great follow on Twitter. And, I get the people that I have time to get on as often as I can. So we'll have him on the show again in the future. But, he did do a good job of calling in. Although I will say this, I think most people expected what happened to happen. I don't think anybody, maybe a few pie in the sky people thought that the Pac-12 / leaving 10 would win their argument, but I think that was a small minority. They were expecting this. That's why they did it in Colfax.
Yeah. How ridiculous is this? We have the conference, 10 teams, 2 teams. We've got a 3-way lawsuit going on here.
Right. Here's one. Kenneth Evans says the state Supreme only determines legality of the original ruling.
Mm-hmm.
That still doesn't tell me, though, at the end of the day, who has the controlling interest? Is it going to be the feds, California, or any other state, or Washington Supreme Court?
Well, they'll probably rule that it was a legal ruling.
Yeah, I can't. That's the part I don't understand, and why I wanted to ask about just going right to the Supreme Court and skipping the appellates, which I hear does happen, but not very often. And that's because all they're really ruling on at the Washington Supreme Court is what he said. Was that a valid ruling? That's all they can't go back and look at why he made the ruling.
Right.
They just have to either back him up or strike it down.
Right, but I think what Washington's asking is a TRO so that they can review it properly.
I got.
They don't want. Yeah, so I mean, it's basically Washington's trying to drag this out as long as they can. Washington State and Oregon State don't have the financial means to continue with the legal bills that are going to be piling up.
Yeah,
we already know Washington State's in the debt and had to restructure a lot of their spending.
And they'll probably try to use PAC funds paid out to themselves to cover their costs. So I think for all parties involved now, it is in their best interest to get this thing settled now. I think this was enough to get Oregon State. I think Oregon State and Washington State were probably the ones who were being a little more obstinate at the negotiating table and not the 10. The 10 are pretty straightforward about what they want.
Yeah, they have nothing. They have everything to gain, nothing to lose at this point.
I just don't think that they had any reason at that point to move off of 100% of what they want. Now they might move to like 80%. And then I think that might be enough for Oregon State and Washington State to say, okay, just, throwing that out there.
Charles M says only needs substantial evidence at most to make a ruling. Charles also says the appeal is just to maintain opportunity to settle. In other words, to extend that time where they can negotiate. And the thing is,
absolutely,
the Pac-2, Washington State, Oregon State time is not on their side.
Yes, and I don't think it's on anyone's side. I mean, look at Arizona. Yeah. You think they're the only ones that are having problems? I think they were all expecting this money and now looking at this going, what are we going to get? So,
right.
I think they need to know what's coming in.
Cleveland Rocks, another one of our paid subscribers, says University of Arizona must have borrowed Washington State's accountant. That's funny.
No, the federal government did. That's a federal government accountant at the University of Arizona. Just
I
make
think
$250 million disappear.
it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I think it just shows you, I mean, how many schools have we seen this now in the Pac-12? They mismanaged their stand. The moment they hired Larry Scott, it was like they were dealing with monopoly money. Every one of these institutions went heavily into debt, leveraged debt, by the way, with assets, and said, we're going to be here forever because we're the Conference of Champions. And they behaved like the gravy train was going to continue forever.
Pack has been a problem for a while.
Yeah.
I don't want to go into all the details of what they've blown up that were agreements across all the multiple conferences, but they've been a headache.
Agreed. All right, guys. I think we're going to call it good. It's a fantastic show. Do you guys, Moen, do you have anything else you want to add to the show tonight?
You like my hat?
I do like
it really
your
is.
$7 hat.
It's a tremendous hat. Best $7 I ever spent.
Oh, I love it. Immaculate.
We've got a lot going on. You know, we're actually at a point where I am ready for us to get some progress. So here's the progress. Here's to hopefully we get a settlement. Hopefully the CFP can move forward here within the next couple of weeks, and we can start talking about something else.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's what most people want. It's been fun to watch, like a car wreck, but at some point
you're like,
on,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
we're kind of ready.
Right. Well, everybody, I appreciate you being here. Bob Thompson, if you missed it and you're just new to the channel or just started watching now, rewind from the beginning and watch the Bob Thompson interview. It was 32 minutes of absolute beautimous conversation. It was fantastic. Answer a bunch of questions, and I think you'll really enjoy it. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Give us a comment or suggestion. Give us a thumbs up. How hard is that? Hit that little thumb, and then turn on your notifications. For Immaculate and for Moen, I am Bomber, and we will see you guys tonight. Stay out of trouble. Sorry, Friday night for our Pick'em show. Stay out of trouble, and peace out.